Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Niels, or Guns for Hire. Whatever you want to call me, it doesn't really matter. I can't hear you. I'm sure there's worse names out there. Anyway, I want to talk about an article I just came across here, and I want to talk about it not to what seemingly is the normal case on YouTube, which is, and believe me, I'm guilty of this in the past as well, which is to find something and make it, stir it up and get you all angry, and people are like, this is an outrage, blah, pickets and pitchforks and torches. I actually want to do this because it's already in that state, and I'm going to be talking about the used game fees, rates, the debacle that's stirring up concerning the Xbox One. I just actually came across an article on, I think it's CVG. I'll put a link to it in the description. You can read it yourself. But it's important that we with the lack of information coming directly from them, like an official statement. I shouldn't say lack of information coming from them, because all of this crazy shenanigans going on here is actually from tidbits of conversations from actual employees. That's an important thing to remember as well. And I'm not saying that we got the story straight, because we're hearing like a snippet of information about used games and then we're just making assumptions. Or I shouldn't say we are, but the websites, the media websites, all the video game websites are, you know, taking it like, oh, well, it must mean this, and then someone reads it and they're like, oh my goodness, and maybe they say what was on that article, or maybe they elaborate a little bit more. It actually means this, but it also means this, and then boom, fireball, and everyone's all pissed off. So this is what I've gathered from all of this. Now, the premise of this video here is to let you know that the article that I found just now, like a few minutes before I started recording this, stated that Sony in the PlayStation 4 may be using a similar DRM for used games, which is the digital rights management. It's how they control it. And it makes sense. You got to think about it. Sony's being very smart, and I mentioned this before. They're not even like, well, look at that, Microsoft's taking all the flack. They're looking like the white knight. Everyone's like, oh, darn you, Microsoft. But Sony hasn't said anything. No employees or executives like Microsoft, you know, in these conversations have sort of divulged any of this information. So we're all shaking our fists at, well, some of you are. I'm not. But, you know, I'm not saying you're the bad guy. I'm like, kill, you're the one. It's not me. I'm perfect. Far from it. So they're shaking their fists at Microsoft, and Sony's like, we're going to do the same thing, because that's what basically it looks like. And it makes sense. You're not going to have a company like Microsoft put out a system where essentially fees from used games, even in GameStop, right? So this doesn't necessarily mean, and I'll explain that too, because I've gathered a ton of information. I'm always listening, always reading, trying to get some sort of truth out here and negate all of the fires and the explosions and the rage that's going on in the community right now. And it makes sense. If Microsoft is saying, hey, you know what, we're going to collect fees from used games and distribute some of that to the publishers and developers, and of course ourselves, there's no way Sony's not going to do it. If Microsoft is taking that step, and maybe it wasn't even Microsoft, maybe this was something that was established before Microsoft even mentioned anything to do with this, and it was just Microsoft that happened to leak a little bit of information here and there from, you know, interviews, and it's exploded. But you know, Sony, it makes sense. If the developers and publishers are getting some fees, they're like, you know what, when every time a used game gets sold, because some of the publishers and developers were not happy with the used games as well. Some of them said, ah, well, whatever, we don't really care. Others implemented the online pass, like EA, which apparently they've canceled. But you know what, they've canceled it for a reason. Someone actually linked that to me, that, well, EA's canceled it. Well, you don't really need the EA Online Pass when Microsoft is going to collect it on your behalf. You see what I'm saying? Now, so I just wanted to put that out there so that you can, if you're still going to be angry based on this lack of information that we have here, which I don't think you should be angry at. Let's just wait and see what happens. But if you're going to be angry and shake your fist at Microsoft, the same sort of thing should technically be at Sony. You could be guaranteed they're doing it. I don't personally think that you should be angry for either of them. You know what I mean? My understanding, and here it is for additional clarification based on everything that I've read over the last week or so, or since the Xbox One unveiling, is that sure, there's going to be there will be a used game fee, but not something that you necessarily have to pay. Like, you're not going to get a used game like you would at GameStop. You're not going to pay for that and then go home and have to go online like Xbox Live or Sony the PlayStation, whatever, it's the PSN, PlayStation Network, and then pay an additional fee to get that pass. The way that it's going to happen now, at least my understanding, is that when you buy a game, a used game at GameStop, that fee is already incorporated into the structure of the game. So that's where all this confusion's coming from. There isn't really a fee that you're going to pay. There is a fee that's, you know, a certain amount of percentage of the money and the sales from used games that are going back to Microsoft, going back to Sony and the respective developers, but it's not something that you're really even going to know is there. Now, apparently, based on this article too, is that there is, like I mentioned, again, I forget what they said, but it's some sort of encryption on each unique disc that your system will pick up, uninstall it from the previous owner, and then reinstall it for yours. So this is this installation, and that's also probably why it has to have once every 24-hour connection. Now, what does this mean for used games? Is it going to drive the price up? We don't know that yet. That's the only thing that I'm concerned about. My only concern is that if that fee, or it's a base rate or a percentage of what Microsoft and possibly Sony are going to collect from the used game, will that, you know, will GameStop go, well, if they're going to take that, that's like, you know, maybe it's 30 bucks. And then GameStop's going to like, well, okay, well, we need profit, because they're not going to sell it out of the goodness of their heart. It's business. So they're going to tack on their profit margin as well. So will that actually drive up sort of the base level of used games? If that's true, then that's a good possibility. I'm not saying it will, but it's a possibility, depending on the structure of it. We don't know yet, and that's why I'm saying there's no need to get angry. You may not even notice a single change in the actual prices of used games. You may not know that. And maybe GameStop will alter that, because remember, it's also their business. If they rack up or they jack up the prices of used games so much that it's comparable to a new game, they're not going to make anything on that. You know what I mean? They're not going to do that. The only difference is like how much, when we find out what the structure is, and maybe we don't, maybe this is behind closed doors, maybe we'll only, you know, only Microsoft and Sony will know what the fees are associated with used games. As long as you go into the store and your used games are comparable to the current used game fees, what do you really care? What does it matter? It doesn't matter if Microsoft and Sony are making the money. You don't own the company. Why do you care? It's not like they're charging your mom for some heart transplant or something. Don't take it so personally. It's business, and let them worry about that, and you worry about the games. So as long as your experience is fine, as long as the used game market is still there, which it seemingly will be, they're not going to demolish it. And if the fees are, you know, embedded within the actual price and the prices aren't that high, who really cares? But just know that Sony is also likely on board. So stop, you know, bashing. It's just, for me, it's like fire control over the hatred, fanboyism really, which really bugs me. It always has, always probably will. But the fanboyism of attacking Microsoft. Look at them, they're horrible. Meanwhile, Sony's like, wait till we announce it and tell them that we're doing the same thing. Boy, hopefully all the anger will be gone and everyone will be spent it on Microsoft. That's just the way it is. So I'm just keeping you guys informed. Remember, the article is in the description below. Have yourself a wonderful day. I will see you tomorrow.